one and all, welcome to Seen Through Glass. Welcome to part 3 of my Drive the World movie. If you missed parts 1 or 2, please go back and check them out to see the first 3 months of our adventure. To recap, in 2019, my girlfriend Viki and I set off on a 12-month trip to discover what car culture is like around the world. In those first 2 episodes, we travelled to Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong, China, Japan, India, and Cape Town. And in this episode, we're going to focus on the European leg of the trip. Now, this was kind of one of the most challenging legs because, fundamentally, over the years, I've already explored so much of Europe and filmed so many videos in and around Europe, I didn't really know how I was going to kind of make it feel fresh or different. Also, it was hard to get that motivated or inspired to travel vlog parts of Europe because, as I say, it was all a little bit familiar. However, sitting here now and looking back at everything we did during that time, it's pretty mind-blowing. We had hypercar test drives, taking my 911 Carrera T on the Nürburgring, meeting with Formula 1 drivers, and so much more. Now, this episode is going to be slightly different in format to the first 2 because rather than literally taking you through step by step everything we did, I feel like that might take about 4.5 hours, I'm going to pick out kind of my favourite moments and tell you a little bit more about what was going on during that time. And of course, with Viki, we're going to be talking through those kind of behind the scenes anecdotes that never made it onto my social media. So sit back, try to relax, and I hope you enjoy part 3 of my Drive the World movie. Now, despite what felt like some pretty meticulous planning, our European leg didn't actually kick off as planned because my 911 Carrera T was still on its way back from Australia. I think we waved goodbye to it in Perth at the end of January, and this was 2 months later, end of March, and it was floating outside Yemen somewhere, still a few weeks away from the UK. However, we were saved by Porsche UK because they agreed to lend us a 911 Turbo S until my car returned. Now, secretly, I was a little bit worried that I wouldn't really want to get back into my car after spending time in a Turbo S, but I thought, hey, let's take that risk. So yeah, I was ecstatic to jump in the quite iconic 911 Hull Turbo S, a car that Porsche UK have run for many years. One of my favourite stops early on in Europe was actually in northern Spain, just outside Bilbao, where I went to check out one of the largest Rolls-Royce collections in the world. These guys have one of every model made between, I think, 1907 and 1997. It's ridiculous. And they're all housed in what looks like a kind of ancient Spanish tower fort. However, it turned out that the actual whole place was kind of brand new. It had been built by the sort of multi-millionaire owner of the collection to kind of feel like it was ancient and old, but actually not be ancient and old. But anyway, checking out the cars was amazing. The guys who ran it or looked after it were also hilarious.
I had a party here on Saturday with my friends. I was celebrating my birthday. And
you were all in the carriage?
I don't know what
yeah. Boys and girls, welcome Andre back to the channel. Right, for anyone that didn't see my last video, can you just remind everyone, firstly, who you are, but secondly, why this car is so special?
My name is Andre. I work at Sport Class. Well, the car that we sat down at the moment is a special car for me. It's a car that belonged to my grandfather. It's the last car that my grandfather raced with.
Do you know, I think this is described as being a hoarder. Did you know that?
No.
No, okay, so a hoarder is someone that collects a lot of things and can't stop.
Yes.
Yeah. There's so much to look at. I could spend about 3 years just taking everything in. Those of you that have watched part 1 of this Drive the World movie would have seen me drive the Porsche 918 Spider whilst in New Zealand. That was like my first time getting behind the wheel of one of the iconic holy trio of hypercars that are made up by the 918 Spider, the Ferrari LaFerrari and the McLaren P1. And on that day, I kind of set myself the goal to drive the other two at some point during Drive the World. I just didn't know when or how that would happen. Now, whilst in Marbella, I got a message from a local car spotter saying, "Hey Sam, if you've got nothing going on, I know a sort of big car collector that might be willing to bring out 1 or 2 of his cars for you to photograph or look at." So off I headed to a little nearby cafe, and I was sitting there minding my own business, having a very healthy smoothie and an espresso, when I heard a rather familiar exhaust note. I hear something. No. I absolutely lost it. But let's not forget, I thought I was just going to be taking photos of it or just looking over it or just, putting it into a sort of wider Marbella vlog. We're sitting there talking with the owner and he goes, "Well, look, I'm going to have another espresso. Why don't you take the car for a quick whip around the block?" I went, "Sorry, what?" He goes, "Yeah, just go for a bit of a spin." So in the LaFerrari, he was like, "Yeah, there's the key, go have fun." Now, usually I'm a bit bashful and shy, "Oh, don't be silly, no way." I grabbed that key out of that guy's hand quicker than I don't know what. I was like, "Yeah, okay, sure, no problem, like I'm gone." So we jumped in the car, me and the local photographer, and yes, took his LaFerrari for a spin around the block.
Did you say tunnel? Did you say tunnel? Underpass. How do we do the window? Sick. Just a bit of casual wheel spin at 3,000 RPM.
It wasn't an epic mountain or track driving experience, but it didn't matter. I had driven a LaFerrari. And I think, at slow speeds, it felt kind of easy, almost like a 458, but the minute you stabbed the throttle, you just were reminded by how much insane power was behind you. That thing was spinning its wheels way too easily. And then, of course, you just knew that you were in a LaFerrari and everyone's looking and you just feel, it was amazing. Of course, driving a LaFerrari made Marbella pretty special, but there was another reason why Marbella was special for us. It's because that's where actually Viki and I met. How international of us.
Super international.
An Englishman and a
Exotic.
Bulgarian in Spain. But we were there because actually it was an event I'd been invited to, along with Paul Wallace from Supercars of London, so he was the third wheel that time. And Viki was there working as part of the events team. I don't really want to go into the details of it, I'd like to leave it there, but you're going to make me, aren't you?
Well, yeah, just say what happened.
Okay, well, basically, a big part of the event was kind of like this extreme sports called flyboarding. Now, most of you will know that I'm not the biggest fan of the sea, and I'm obviously not very extreme. So it's kind of like my worst nightmare, but there was someone on the event I was trying to impress, and I didn't want to, pussy out.
It's not a good impression.
Not a good impression when I'm like,
When you chicken out on a boat.
"There's a whale in there!" So I was like, "Yeah, hey, rock and roll, I love flyboarding, I do it all the time."
Actually, Paul Wallace smashed it. It was the first time he'd done it, so he went in before Sam and he did a huge backflip, had the most amazing time. Then Sam goes in. You can kind of tell by looking at Sam that he's not going to be good at it.
That was why I was too tall.
Yeah, exactly. And,
So
you can't blame you for it. But yeah, he looked like a spaghetti in the water.
You know what I look like? You remember those inflatable men that...
Yeah, exactly. They're sort of like a cheese string.
Yeah, like a cheese string.
Inflatable cheese string.
Thought I was nailing it. I was like, this girl is just going to be eating out of my palm. But I think I watched some footage back later that Paul was filming from the boat and I could literally hear Viki laughing. So.
Did you say that we were in one of the really cool spots in Marbella, the Marbella Club, which was actually, and it was off season, so it was just the kind of group that organised the event and the guests.
Yeah, one of the best resorts in Marbella, and so whilst we were there, we actually went back to the hotel. We couldn't afford to stay in the hotel, but we went back for dinner, and it was slightly one of those cases of don't meet your heroes, because again, it was off season, just like the event when we met, so it was pretty abandoned, and we did have a good dinner, but it was kind of expensive, and we were a bit like, oh yes.
There was no point, stay with your memories, and
stay with the memories.
That's it.
one place I've always wanted to go with the car is Mallorca, the little island just south of Spain. I've always heard there are some amazing driving roads on that island, and actually I saw one documented in an Evo video where Henry Catchpole was driving a Boxster GTS headed somewhere called Cap de Formentor, the sort of northern part of the island. His advice in that video is if you're going to do the drive, get up early to do so, otherwise it gets kind of flooded with cyclists and tourists. So I took his advice and one morning woke up at about 4 or 5 a.m. to go and drive the road by myself. I was going to leave Viki asleep at the hotel, but as I was loading up the car, I get this phone call from her being like, wait, I want to come with you. And I'm so glad she did, because it turned out to be one of the most beautiful drives we've ever done. We'd actually been lent a BMW M850i for the morning, and that turned out to be completely the wrong car. It's huge. It's huge. I mean, it's great, but it's huge. And yeah, most of the time I was just like, breathe in. But yeah, we timed it perfectly. And despite sort of, coming across a few goats in the middle of the road on the way there, we got to the lighthouse at the end of the road just as the sun was rising. And it was special. And then as we headed back, we stopped off for photos and flybys, and the road got busier and busier, but the kind of final thing we did before we actually left was go right up to the top of a viewing point. You could look over the entire peninsula, and the views up there were insane.
Yes! Mallorca!
This is just ridiculous. It kind of reminds me of Tenerife when we went for the McLaren 570 GT launch. Seb and I did that sunrise drive.
My life wasn't perfect, yeah, I know that now. When it came crashing down, all I know is that I need you around. When it comes crashing down.
Now obviously Porsche had spoilt us with the Turbo S loan. However, they had one more surprise in place before we were reunited with my Carrera T. They'd lined up a brand new 992 Carrera S for us to take from Barcelona across to Monaco, where my car would be waiting for us. And that felt pretty special because at the time, not many people had got their hands on the 992, so it kind of almost felt like a bit of an exclusive, and I felt like I was being looked after by Porsche. I was like, this is pretty cool. The car itself, actually, I think turned out to be a bit of a disappointment. I mean, it's great, arguably better in every way than the previous generation, but I felt like it lost a little bit of personality. It was a bit more Bentley, BMW 8 Series, a bit more of a GT car. Like, it is quick, but I struggled to like laugh and smile whilst driving it.
He's away! That's the slowest start we've ever seen.
Like, you're a better YouTuber than I. That is me waving goodbye to the 992 Porsche 911. It is on its way back to Germany, back to Porsche HQ, and that is because in a few hours I'm going to finally be reunited with my 911 Carrera T. Even though we'd just been reunited with my car though, we sidelined it pretty much immediately because Lamborghini had invited us to the factory to borrow an Aventador S Roadster for the weekend. Now most of you know I'm not a massive Lamborghini fan, and I'm not a huge Aventador fan, but that's not an offer you ever turn down. I was like, oh my God, yes, amazing. So yes, we drove from Monaco across into Italy to the factory, had an amazing tour of the factory, and weirdly discovered that the American YouTuber Dr. M3 was there at the exact same time speccing his Aventador SVJ. It was amazing to see him. We had an incredible lunch at a sort of local cafe right next door to the factory. And then afterwards, before we set off on our kind of weekend road trip, Lamborghini said, look, why don't you join Dr. M3? He's about to go out on one of our kind of factory test drives. Now, if I was to say to you, imagine, what would a Lamborghini factory test drive be like? Well, it's pretty much exactly what you hope it would be like, because it's absolutely insane.
I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready.
I'm telling you though. We also got on it. I was like, boom. I'm like,
Yeah. That's
Oh,
literally me. I was like, why did we eat lunch before this?
It was a super intense experience to start our Lambo weekend. I was like, yep, this is what it's like to be a Lamborghini owner. We did manage to take the car onto some long flowing roads over the weekend, and actually at one point we were driving with the roof off, and as we're going along and I'm doing a piece to camera, I heard this big thud behind me and I'm like, oh god, what have I broken? Turned out to be bird poo.
That is so fresh.
Like a bomb.
I heard it. I just thought, oh, something's creaking. It's a Lambo.
It's on the inside.
And it's juicy,
So
it's
gone,
juicy.
So it's gone over the roof, inside the window.
I realise up until now you're probably a little bit confused as to where we had been and what we've been doing, but that's pretty much how we felt for the entirety of Europe. Let's not forget we passed through, I think, 25 countries in the 3 months that the European leg took place, and so far we've been through France, Spain, into Portugal, back into the south of Spain, got some ferries across to Ibiza and Mallorca.
Sort of up and down and across and back and forth, and it was just
Frantic.
everywhere. The route didn't make any sense.
Well, in my mind, it made some sense. We had a little bit of luxury waiting for us in Geneva to kind of help us with our rest and recuperation from the madness that was the few weeks before. And that came in the form of the Four Seasons Geneva. A bit like the Peninsula Hotel in Hong Kong. They'd offered to put us up very kindly, and it definitely a hotel we could never afford to stay in ourselves. So that was amazing, and I think we both loved it, but I feel like you really loved that hotel.
We were super lucky. We were definitely super lucky, and I loved it because it was just so cozy and comfortable, and it just felt like home. Not that we live somewhere where it looks like the Four Seasons, but
well, you can see, but we don't. But anyway.
it was just comfortable, and we had a nice apartment again, so it gave us a bit of space. And having been away from a home and actually abandoning our flat before we left, we just moved everything out and put it in storage. There was a much needed way to feel a little bit at home, and luxury hotels deliver that.
Absolutely, especially because the fact they bought me presents every single day. Literally, whenever I walked into the room, there was a present for me, not for Vicky, for me, seen through glass
I don't need any
merch.
presents.
Oh, okay, good to know. But yeah, it was absolutely lovely and made our time in Geneva pretty special. I always have quite high expectations when going to Switzerland for epic car content. It's just somewhere I always think of seeing incredible cars driving through Swiss mountain roads and epic collections and amazing dealerships. And actually on one of the days I went to visit one of those epic dealerships, but quite a new one called Clausen. And they're sort of based just outside Geneva but still on the lake. And I was there kind of minding my own business, filming what they had in stock and talking through the business when a guy comes down the stairs who I later learned was a sort of a customer or client, and he recognises me. He goes, "Oh, seen through glass." And I'm like, "Yeah, hey, what's going on?" And he goes, "Oh, I've got a Pagani Huayra outside if you want to have a go." I'm like, What? And he goes, "Yeah, I don't think you've ever driven one. Do you want to have a quick go?" And I was like, "Yes." So, ba-bong! That is the key right there. The little front of the car goes down onto its little holder. Just there you go. Wedge him in. This goes into there. Everything comes alive. Foot on the brake and. The Huayra is not really a car that I've ever sort of obsessed over. I don't know many details about it or facts and stats about it. I've always preferred the Zonda, and it's not a car I've ever thought that one day I might buy, so I don't sit there sort of reading up details. But there I was in the car with the owner, and I was like, I can't make an idiot of myself. So I was trying to think of like intelligent things to say, and I'm like, oh, well, the air conditioning's nice. All of the sort of dials and air conditioning units all seem to work. That's not interesting, is it? Oh my God, it's just such a bizarre moment in life. What an idiot, but I'm not like Schmier. Put me in a high pressure scenario like that. I can't just splurt facts, but I didn't care. I was still going to love every second of the opportunity and such a surprise. That was the biggest thing about it. But Switzerland had definitely like stepped up. They'd stepped up to the plate when it comes to drive the world. Stefan wasn't wrong. That coffee really was really good. And given the fact that it's 6 p.m. and I had an espresso at the dealership like an hour ago, and now I've had a delicious oat milk cappuccino, I'm kind of buzzing. Do you know if that's coming across on camera?
So we see here the C2 prototypes in production. We are actually building somewhere around 30.
I think anyone that has driven through Serbia would know what I mean, which is essentially roads.
Awful roads, yeah. I mean, even the motorways, you've got to think it must be quite a big main route through the country was just pothole filled.
Every time I get behind the wheel of the 911,
Police would come over, yeah.
Haven't
But
had
there
a
was a
fine.
reason.
Haven't had a fine.
There was a reason.
Well, no, this time there wasn't.
No, you've been speeding.
No. So you're missing the point here. I toured him down from Bulgaria to kind of become friends.
Become chummy.
And he sort of started speaking to me in broken Serbian/Bulgarian. And what I gathered was he said, "You've been speeding. We've got speeding cameras along the route. We know you've been speeding. You're going to end up in jail. Do you know how much trouble you're in? Blah, blah, blah." And I was just like, I haven't actually been speeding. The guy is lying to me. You know, I know how Eastern Europeans work.
You know the scams.
I know how they work. So he started threatening me, really intimidating me. And I just thought, really, for the last stretch, I haven't actually done any speeding. He asked me what I do as a profession. And so we both said that we're journalists. And he absolutely panicked and said, "Off you go.
I want nothing more to do with you.
Go on your own way."
I'd definitely been spoilt in kind of like the first half of the European leg. I mean, driving LaFerraris, 488 Pista Spider, Aventador S Roadster, F12 TDF, Pagani Huayra, to name a few. And I sort of felt like I maybe hadn't experienced that much of sort of, you know, credible local car culture. And maybe I was, you know, this is it, Europe's just full of supercars. But whilst in Bulgaria, I was determined to kind of get down and gritty and experience an iconic car from that part of the world, the Lada. Nope, okay. Windows don't work. Why am I being followed by this biker? I'm not really sure if I'm about to get in trouble. Maybe there's a chase is on. Oh, I feel like I'm in a James Bond film and I'm a sort of bad Soviet Union character.
You will not catch me, Mr. Bond, on your bike. I'm in my Lada 1500 with no air conditioning.
As is often the case with any kind of affordable, cheap and easy to repair and maintain car, the modified Lada scene is apparently huge.
And that's me getting cocky. That's me getting cocky, which means it's time for me to head back.
After Bulgaria, we headed sort of back into what I would call the main central part of Europe, and that felt like Germany. I mean, I don't know why, but it felt like after Bulgaria, we spent about 17 months in Germany.
Back and forth.
All around.
In Germany.
Like just everywhere in Germany. I guess I arranged it that way. We did have a few sort of like commercial obligations that changed and moved around, which sort of kept us in Germany longer than we'd hoped. But I remember at a point just being like, we cannot eat another schnitzel. Like we will become schnitzel.
Schnitzel.
Yeah, it was super horrific. But actually, looking back at it now, I made some amazing content during that time. I went to see that Schumacher Formula One collection, which you didn't come to see, which you missed out. We went to see Jer Collector and his amazing cars. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
Down
that
in
was
sort
a
of
fun
basement.
day. That was a fun day
Super
with
cool
the big
day.
teddy bear.
Hockenheim Ring with Jamie Chadwick.
That
when it
was fun.
Freezing
It
cold.
was absolutely freezing. It was pouring with rain, but such a cool race to actually see and be part of.
And of course, even though it wasn't Germany, but it felt German, Wörthersee, or Wörthersee, the big VW Treffen.
Oh, that wasn't German.
No, it was Austria, but it felt German because everyone was having schnitzel, and they basically speak.
It was very
German.
Austrian, I thought.
Oh, okay, well I kind of blend the
It was
two.
very rock and roll.
Yeah. The actual location was beautiful, right? Like Wörthersee, an incredible, stunning lakeside village in town. It gets taken over one weekend by just complete VW obsessives with, modified everything you can imagine. And yeah, we were kind of thrown in at the deep end, but we kind of loved it, didn't we?
Yeah.
We absolutely loved it, apart from the moment we watched two scantily clad women wash a man, not a car.
On a car.
Yeah, wash a man on a car.
A man on a car, kind of naked, lots of
They stripped him.
soap and things going on.
And I think they whipped him. I think for any petrol head, the Nürburgring represents this kind of like ultimate test, or maybe even ultimate goal of like, one day I have to get there and I've got to drive the Nürburgring in my own car. So yes, arranged through the master, the maestro that is Misha, a big YouTube celebrity when it comes to the ring. He said, look, we'll get you to go out first in the passenger ride so you can get kind of an idea of the track, and then we'll take your car out and I'll come with you and give you some instructions. Now, that sounds kind of reassuring, doesn't it? But if you've ever seen any of the videos with Misha, you'll know that his instructions are more like, well, it's like being in a rally car. He just talks continuously at you. I mean, the brain capacity to process what he's saying whilst also driving relatively fast, I was like, don't die.
Stay left a bit more and let go, turn and right curbstone, tighter. And yeah, there we go. Now on the brakes and going straight into the carousel.
Woo.
And stay on the concrete bit, and at the exit, the right corner of the concrete plate should be in the middle of the car, and then to the right curbstone. There we go.
There we go.
And after the jump, you can go on the brakes.
The jump?
Yeah. The right curbstone, and to the outside, and then back right curbstone, to the middle of the track.
Oh, we've survived! We've survived! Dude, thank you so much, honestly.
Good. It was awesome.
Oh, it was awesome for sure, but wow! So after our sort of 85 months in Germany, we're finally heading north towards the big Scandinavian adventure that we've been looking forward to for pretty much the entirety of our European trip. But before that, we did have a few exciting countries to visit, Poland being one. However, because of the sort of commercial obligations which I mentioned to you about, which kept us in Germany longer than planned, our time in Poland shrunk. And we ended up getting only like one night in Warsaw, which was a massive shame because we actually kind of loved it, didn't we? For the brief time we were there, we had that massive hotel. I wish I could remember its name. The Hotel Warszawa?
Probably, yeah. I think you're right. Yeah.
And it was like an industrial kind of, just cool hotel. I don't know how else to explain it.
Warehousey, yeah.
It had a good vibe to it. Minimalistic. Great view over the roads. And we explored the city pretty much exclusively on electric scooters, limes.
On a Lime, yeah. It was the first time we'd seen a Lime in Europe. We knew they existed in America, but I think that was the sort of boom of it.
We saw a ton of the city, and yeah, just really enjoyed it. Thought it was full of cool people and cool culture, and
Weather was amazing.
weather was amazing. And that evening we went to that kind of like time out style pop-up restaurant kind of centre, met with a couple of local car guys. Do you remember we went to that corner where they said it really kicks off here at like 1 a.m? We saw like a few people doing like revs and
Yeah, it was
burnouts
fun.
and stuff.
It was fun.
It's one place I really wish I'd spent more time was Poland in general, but also Warsaw. So I think one place we've got to get back to. But we were on a tight timeline, as always. So it was time to continue heading north through sort of, where Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, towards Scandinavia. Since the Nullarbor in Australia, we felt like we hadn't done a sort of big getting lost road trip adventure.
There was a lot of motorway driving, I suppose, and yeah, there wasn't a lot of nature.
Exactly, and we kind of thought Scandinavia would give us the chance to get a bit lost and get out there and go to some remote parts and maybe see some mooses. What's the plural of moose? What is the plural of moose?
It's moose.
Moose. We might see, like sheep.
Yes, like sheep.
Learn something new every day.
What do I believe? What makes me feel it to write you this song?
It's 10:20 at night. What is this?
5 months and a year. Oh, I loved you too long.
So whilst Finland had been kind of amazing and empty and full of trees like we were hoping, Sweden had been a little bit sort of wet and a tiny bit disappointing. But once we got into Norway, we started to get really excited again. And I think that stop at the Great Atlantic Ocean Road. Atlantic Ocean Road was definitely worthwhile. We had to drive about 6 hours out of the way, but we both really enjoyed it.
As usual with all these things, it's always, at least 3 hours away.
Scandinavia was big. Like plotting our route through Scandinavia was tricky because everything was so far away from each other and there's not a lot of hotels. But you enjoyed the whatever the road was called.
Even me, the picky Viki.
No, I didn't mean it like that, but fundamentally I went there just to drive a road, and it's not exactly speedy.
No, but it was beautiful and it actually looked surreal because of the sort of the heights of it and the fact that it really does look like you're driving on water.
It's like a piece of tarmac that just threads its way over the ocean. And yeah, it's very cool. It's a little unnerving driving on it because it doesn't look that stable as a structure. I mean, anyone who's scared of the sea, like myself, the thought that you could fall into the sea at any point is very real. All in all, I do think the Scandinavian adventure was great, but the rainy days, I say in northern Sweden and around Bodo. Remember Bodo?
Yeah, Bodo was the only sort of most populated place that we could stop at up north.
It's the kind of launching point that I think a lot of American tourists, or just tourists in general, go sort of to visit some of the islands, just the Lofoten Islands, just off north of Norway. We were quite excited about it getting there, weren't we? Because it was supposed to be the summer solstice, the longest day of the year.
Yeah, and we were sort of at our highest-ish point.
This was the kind of thing I was hoping for from this little adventure. Okay, fine, I wasn't expecting snow, as I've already mentioned. It's the 21st of June, so I didn't think we'd be seeing this much snow. But anyway, we are on a sort of high road, passing over from Sweden into Norway, and it's just incredible. This is the longest 3-hour journey I've ever done because I keep stopping for photos. Every single corner we go around, there's another amazing view. Either it's a lake or a hill or a waterfall or snow. Wow! I'm whispering a reindeer. Wow, they're not even scared of us. Somebody else has pulled over here. Look, this boss man. I don't want to scare them away, but I kind of want to pose up for a photo as well. The end of the kind of mainland European leg of Drive the World actually had a bit of a frustrating finish because we'd done so much, been to so many places and done that mega adventure across Finland, Sweden and Norway. We were kind of up against it timing-wise. I had to be back in the UK for Goodwood Festival of Speed, arguably one of the biggest automotive events of the year. I had various sponsor commitments and other commercial stuff going on, which meant I simply couldn't miss it. Also, it didn't feel right to do a sort of series travelling around the world discovering what car culture is like and not to kind of big up the biggest and best thing that I think the UK does in the car scene. So yes, it meant we had to kind of rush through those final few countries of Denmark, the Netherlands and Belgium. All it means is we have an excuse to get back there as soon as possible. So it's actually at this moment that I'm going to wrap up today's episode of my Drive the World movie. Of course, the UK leg does kind of fall into the European section of the trip, but I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in episode 4, which is mainly going to focus on America. If you thought we were busy and manic in Europe, just you wait and see to all the stuff we got up to in the US of A. I don't actually even know how I'm going to tackle that episode. I'm a little bit daunted by it, but I hope you've enjoyed this episode. A bit different to parts 1 and part 2, but that's just because it was impossible to discuss everything we got up to in Europe. And if you do want to go back and remind yourself of all the things we did, all the videos are still live in the Drive the World playlist, so you can go back now, check them all out. Give this video a thumbs up if you have enjoyed it, and make sure you stay subscribed for plenty more videos to come.